The following film is the video portion of an E6-4 lesson. E6-4 is the computerized curriculum designed for home schools, Christian schools, family worship, Sunday schools, and church Bible study groups. For more information, visit the website at www.e6-4.com.
So now you've heard how to make the bed up, how to feed the baby, and at what intervals to feed the baby, when to put the baby to bed, and when to help the baby have an awake time so it'll sleep better at night. And Tammy's going to touch on the issue of crying, because for a young mother, I know that first cry of that newborn, it's kind of traumatic, because you want to associate emotion with the cry, and that's not necessarily the case. You know, I always tell the mothers that I've counseled through this 16 years of doing this ministry is that if your baby is crying off and on all day, take the baby to the doctor and rule out any medical condition, because that is not normal. But once you put the baby on the schedule, you will find that there are stretches of time where the baby is very quiet, very peaceful, and not crying, but the crying will kind of land right in that 2 to 6 time or 6 to 10 time at the end of the day, which is really wonderful, because then you know that that is good, normal, developmental crying, and you don't need to be concerned over that. But Tammy, can you give us a few more tips about the importance of that cry time?
Well, sure. Crying is that word that we don't really want to hear, but if you have a little one, it's something that you will be dealing with. Many mothers think that they should stop all crying from the baby, that would be the mother's job, to stop the baby from crying. And a lot of mothers think that on this schedule the baby's just going to cry all night, but that is certainly not true. They're not going to cry all night, and they're not going to cry all day either. Dr. Denmark says that crying is absolutely necessary. It is an important part of the baby's development, and we would worry if the baby did not cry. That's right. And so I wanted to read you just a little bit of what she says about crying. It's on page 13 of her book. She says it so well. She says, crying is a very important part of a baby's development. Babies must cry, and cry hard. And I think that is a key right there, because it's one thing when your new baby is whimpering, but babies really are able to cry very hard. Yes. The faces get very red, and the arms and legs start swinging, and you just think you didn't know a little newborn could make that much noise. It will surprise you how much your baby can cry, but they need to cry, and cry hard, to open their lungs up to full capacity. And one of Dr. Denmark's famous quotes, "If you don't let this baby cry today, he may make you cry tomorrow." And it is so true. Of course, when the baby does cry, it will suck in that air that Wendy's talking about, swallow the air, and that causes the tummy ache, which causes more crying, which causes the baby to suck in more air. And it is a vicious cycle, but it is a normal cycle for a 3-month-old, a 0 to 3-month-old baby. So this crying should not be stopped. You should not attempt to stop the crying if you've ruled out medical needs. Right. Now, Dr. Denmark always expects a mother to think for herself and use common sense. And so we would definitely know to check for medical issues. Does the baby have a fever? Is there a runny nose or a stuffy nose, a rash? Is the baby gaining weight normally? Those are important things to look for.
Right, and I think it's important, as you said, to realize that if your baby is quiet all the time, that's another reason to go to the doctor. I mean, you want a balance of a baby that's not crying all day, but also if you have a baby that's lethargic and not making any noise at all, even during the normal crying time, that baby needs to go to the doctor too. And another beauty of the schedule is you will begin to predict the things that your baby does, and you will learn that baby's cry earlier, because you'll hear the developmental cry, and you'll see what that's like, and then you will know distinctly when that baby is actually sick, because it's a higher and shriller noise, and unique, I think, from the developmental cry time that you hear at the end of the day.
Right, and like we said, the baby will need about 20 hours of sleep out of 24 hours, so you have that 4 hours left. And much of that 4 hours is going to be crying time. In the beginning, it changes after 3 months, but for the first 3 months, much of that 4 hours will be crying time. But it's very interesting how the crying will take on a definite pattern in a very short time.
It does.
If you are faithful to the schedule, you will quickly figure out that 6 to 10 at night is the crying time. So when the crying is on schedule like that and there do not appear to be any medical issues, it will be the developmental cry. I think more than the crying being an issue for the baby, it is often an issue for the parents, and especially the mother, because God has given us that mother's heart, and you hear that baby crying and you just want to go out and make everything all right, even though that's not necessarily the best thing. But Dr. Denmark says a good mother must love her baby enough to listen to it cry. And I would just like to encourage you not to try to stop the crying by giving medicine. Dr. Denmark humorously says it would be better for the parents to take the medicine and put themselves to sleep than to give the medicine, the baby medicine, and try to put it to sleep. We always laugh about that. But don't try to stop the crying by walking and rocking either. Now, I did that with my firstborn when she was up through the nights before I knew about Dr. Denmark, and we did all sorts of interesting things through the night to try to stop that crying. But it is not necessary for you to try to stop the crying with walking and rocking. It really won't stop the crying, but it will start a habit that the parents won't like, because the baby will think, oh, if I cry, my mama will come to me even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and she will love on me, and how could a baby resist that?
And Dr. Denmark says it takes 3 days or 3 events to make a habit, and she said it's much easier to start out the right way right from the beginning than to be into something and have to retrain.
That's right.
It's so much harder to retrain. It can be done, and we've certainly talked to many mothers who have done it, but it's much easier to start out where you ladies are right from the beginning.
That's right. Another way that some people try to stop the crying is by feeding. And just from the things that Wendy has said so far, you can see that the feeding time needs to be every 4 hours. That's our schedule, 6, 10, 2, 6, and 10. And if you try to feed the baby every time they cry, you're adding another milk meal on top of food in the baby's tummy that has not had time to digest. So instead of helping the baby, which is your heart to do that, to stop the crying, you're really causing more of a tummy ache, not even realizing that you're doing that. So feeding only leads to more digestive problems and crying, and it won't stop the crying. You need to maintain the every 4-hour schedule. So
a crying shouldn't demand that feeding. And Tammy did bring out a point that Dr. Denmark does talk about. If you feed a baby at 6 and then you turn around and think you need to feed it an hour or 2 later, what happens is that original milk that has gone into the digestive tract or the stomach to be digested is only partially digested, and you're dumping brand new milk on top of it. So basically that food that's already in there does not become nutritional element for the baby. It almost putrefies. And so if an hour goes by and you add some more milk on there, and the baby just gets more and more rotten food in there, and it's really not getting all the calories that it would get from a complete span of 3-hour wait for that feeding. So it's very important not to just keep feeding the baby hour after hour, which promotes more crying and more tummy aches, but to let that digestive cycle really happen.
Right. Well, just don't let crying become an emotional issue for you as the mother. Just remember that it is necessary to open the lungs to full capacity. It is necessary for exercise. And it does help so much to just picture that little baby laying on the pallet when he's screaming and really mad. Just picture him doing his little exercise.
That's right.
He's not old enough to go throw his football yet, but he can kick and scream and get his muscles growing strong. And help the baby get the crying on a schedule that is in the daytime. And you do that by keeping them awake that 6 to 10 p.m. time. Now, crying sounds much worse in the middle of the night. 5 minutes sounds like hours in the middle of the night. But you can help them by keeping that extended wake time in the evening. Will help them be ready for that good rest at nighttime, and so they can sleep at night.
Right. Well, that is good. And just to review something else you said about the strengthening of the lungs. You know, when a baby is inside of us, their lungs are collapsed. They're living in that amniotic fluid. And when they come out, what's the first thing they naturally want to do anyway? They want to cry, because they have hundreds of little air pockets. And Dr. Denmark says crying is the only way all those little air pockets can pop open. And the more of them that pop open, the greater respiratory health later in life. And so that's what you're looking at. You're looking for that child to give it a chance to have the best health it can have with a good feeding, good cry time, good rest, done in an orderly way. And it brings a lot of peace to the home. I do remember getting my first child to sleep through the night. I had put the baby, it was on a beautiful schedule, 6, 10, 2, 6, and 10, and I put her down to sleep. And I remember that first cry that I heard about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I remember that little tug on my heart. It was hard to hear that baby cry in the middle of the night because it took about 3 days to get her to sleep all the way through the night. And so I didn't feed her that first time, but it was hard on the little mommy's heart because you're a new mother and you're doing something for the first time. And I think as new mothers, we all have a passion to do it right. We want to make sure that the babies, we're doing exactly what we need to do for that baby. And so my husband went and got a music player and put a tape in and put it on my nightstand and let me listen to soft music until she fussed herself back to sleep because she was well fed, she was gaining well, there were no medical issues, and I knew the baby just needed to learn how to sleep. And after 3 days, she did it from then on out. And then it became a ministry because other people want to know, how do you get that baby to sleep through the night? Because that's a big issue with new parents. They're just exhausted, and they really don't have to be that way at all. And after I had the 7 children in 11 years, people would come up to me and they go, I bet you haven't slept in over a decade. And I would go, you know, you'd really be surprised. And then that would open the door to share Dr. Denmark's ministry with them also. And boy, has it been great.
Well, I tell you, this is such a simple thing. It can just be an easy thing for you to do in your home to teach a new baby to sleep through the night. Sounds difficult at first glance, but it's really not, because my husband has always said, if you just take that first week, if a person is willing to take that first week and stick to the schedule so consistently, it's just going to be a matter of days until you have a baby sleeping all night. And that is a big difference from feeding through the night week after week, turns into month after month, and suddenly you have a 3 or a 4-year-old that doesn't want to sleep all night because you've trained them that it's okay to be up in the middle of the night.
That's right.
If you just take that first week and just a little bit of crying through the night, yes, until they get accustomed to the schedule, but 3 or 4 nights in the life of a baby to teach it good sleeping habits, such a small price to pay for a peaceful home.
That's right. And I even remember Dr. Denmark saying, you know, even if your baby has a stuffy nose, let's say it gets a little cold, crying is the only way for the baby to blow its own nose, because you can't look at it and hold a tissue up and expect anything to happen. But if the baby cries a little bit, it clears the nasal passages. And she even says that a little bit of crying will bring down a low-grade fever because it produces a little sweat in the baby's body. So crying has, you know, God knew what he was doing. Crying even has a purpose in that baby's life. Well, Tammy, do you want to address any of the maybe emotions and doubts that a new mother has in doing the schedule? I know you do a lot of counseling. Tammy is the experienced mother of 4 children, and she's been teaching these classes for 5 years. And of course I have the 7 and have been teaching the class for over 15, 16 years. And so a lot of times we see that new mother that calls us and some of the doubts and questions she has about these issues.
Right. Well, that is an important issue because a new mother already has so many emotions swimming around inside of her. And I began just after I did the Dr. Denmark system with my first child and thought that surely it wouldn't work again, and it did with the second one and the third and the fourth one. And so I began just teaching it really over the phone and across my kitchen table, and then it began to be more of a class. And in every realm I saw that a mother has lots of questions about the feelings going on inside of her. When you latch on to the Dr. Denmark system, you see that it is not the same things that your local doctor is teaching. It's not the facts that you are reading in the latest parenting magazine. It's not what you read in the book that you picked up at your doctor's office. But it is the old, tried and true, proven methods. And sometimes, just because of the times we live in, we need to be convinced that these really are the proper things that we should be doing. I don't believe you'll really stick to the schedule unless you can be convinced in your heart that this is what you need to be doing with your baby, that this is for the best. And I think of what the prophet Jeremiah said, look for the old ancient paths. the good ways and walk in those, and you will find rest for your soul. And Dr. Denmark's ways, they are the old ancient paths.
Right.
That's how it used to be done. So you have to really get yourself together to believe and trust that the old ways are the good ways when it comes to taking care of your baby. And I think it is the things that are maybe the hardest to convince yourself on, the fact that it is okay to feed your baby on a schedule. But you've explained why to us. And when you know that information in your mind, you can accept that. And when it cries, you wouldn't want to feed the baby because that's not what's best for the baby.
Right.
Putting the baby to sleep on its tummy, that is an emotional issue because of the things we've all seen and read about of could it cause SIDS and things like that. But when you know that that's the way it was done by our parents years ago, those are the old ancient ways of doing that. And when you understand the whys, that all the organs work better when the baby's on the tummy, that when the baby's on its back, its arms and legs are like a little bug, you know, arms and legs just flying, but when it's on its tummy, it's safe, then you can think logically about that and say, I believe it is best to put my baby on its tummy. The issue of the pacifier, all the things that seem at first not exactly what you're hearing from all your friends or from the books that you're reading, if you will think through for yourself about the whys of those, then I think the emotional part will take care of itself. And the emotional part just stems from the fact that we want to do our very best for our baby.
And all mothers, whether they're doing the schedule or the demand, they're going to have those new mother emotions. And so it's not like one set of mothers has more than the other. But the schedule and Dr. Denmark's philosophy just gives you a confidence. Well, before we end this session that's been specifically on the Dr. Denmark philosophy for the baby between birth and 3 months of age, I just wanted to wrap up with a few commonly asked questions or issues that you might have or someone you know might have. The first is, what if I have a premature baby? And certainly we've had lots of Dr. Denmark babies that are born in that 4 to 5 pound range, especially twins who are born smaller. And Dr. Denmark says the preemie needs the schedule more than any of them, because a demand type philosophy will absolutely wear that new little weak body out. And so they, more than any of the children, especially need that regulated schedule of the 4 hours. And so she says, keep right on doing it. I know one exception that we had, we put a baby, a mother I was counseling, we put the preemie on a newborn schedule, and she decided to keep one night feeding if the baby woke up until its birth date. So the baby was born 4 weeks early. She had the baby on a beautiful 6-10-2, 6 and 10 schedule, and she decided if the baby woke up in the middle of the night, she would offer one feeding until its day it was supposed to be born, and then she eliminated that. And that seemed to work well for her. It was a good compromise. She felt like she had the baby on a regulated schedule, but if the baby, that just made her feel better to do that option there. But she did eliminate it after the baby's real birth date, and that worked great. But Dr. Denmark says, yes, preemies definitely need a regulated schedule. They don't need to be worn out from overfeeding, overusing those weak little jaw muscles, and they need every ounce of nourishment from that regulated feeding. They need every ounce from that proper digestive cycle to grow. And then one of our questions was, well, what if we have a baby that naturally puts itself on a schedule? And you know, some children, well, all children have different temperaments, and I've found that having 7 children very close together and just observing hundreds of other children, some children are naturally born more laid back. And you will have a baby that just blends right into the schedule. Looks like you haven't even put any effort to it at all because the baby's laid back. It's a very quiet baby. Some children are more serious. I know I have 2 quiet little butterflies in my family, and they're really not much of talkers. They've always been loved long naps and going to bed early, and the schedule was very easy for them to do. And then I'll have to say I've also had a few live wires that they're usually the children that like to talk right from birth. They wanted to be making some noise with their mouth. And so I had to work harder at getting them on the schedule. The feeding part, the every 4 hours wasn't the problem, but they would be a little bit fussier. During that 6 to 10 fuss time, I had some that wanted to say something the whole time, and the way a baby talks is just through crying, and they would turn red in the face. Matter of fact, I remember calling Dr. Denmark with that first baby and saying, Dr. Denmark, during the crying time, is it okay for them to turn red in the face like they're really mad? And I even took a picture of it to show her. And she said, they'll be fine, they'll be fine. You just keep hanging on. Because remember, this developmental cry time will taper off at 3 months. And then Oh, it's wonderful. Then the baby is going to bed earlier. And when we do our starting baby food class in a few minutes, you will get to understand when you start baby foods, how you adjust the schedule and how they have a longer period at night to sleep anyway. And then basically the fuss time is over. They have should have completely opened up their lungs at that point, and they've gained that respiratory health that's so important. So this crying time that we're talking about and this intense 4-hour schedule is really just a short part of the child's life. And even often now, as my children most of them are grown and I don't really have any babies anymore, I have to make myself think back what that was like, because it went by so fast, and the other part of their lives, their toddlerhood and their teenagehood, comes upon you, and you just get busy with whatever season of life you're in at the time. So just remember that birth to 3 months time, it is so important to get that child off to a good start and give them a chance, whether they have a laid-back temperament and do the schedule very easily, or whether you have to work a little bit harder with one. One little issue I wanted to touch on before we wrap up is a common question I get from new mothers over the phone is they want to make sure that last feeding of the day, the baby's getting enough to sleep through the night. And that makes them feel more confident. If they know for sure that that baby's well fed, then they know they can lay it down and go, yes, this baby can sleep through the night and be fine. Is the end of the day supplementing. A lot of times, especially if you're a nursing mother, you will get to the end of the day at the 6 p.m. or especially the 10 p.m. feeding, and you will feel like you don't have as much milk flow as you did earlier in the day. And really that is probably true. Your fullest feedings will be at the 6, 10, and 2 in the morning. And as you get busy, start feeling better after the baby comes, and you're moving around more, you're burning up more of your own calories just in living yourself, and you may be eating and drinking less. And so sometimes those 6 and 10 p.m. feedings are a little bit lighter, and so Dr. Denmark says, well, just do the supplementing experiment. You know, if you have any doubt after you feed your baby your normal feeding, you make up a bottle, a 2-ounce bottle of formula or breast milk, whichever you're using, and you offer that to the baby. If the baby takes an ounce or less, then they don't need it. They're just playing around. But if the baby takes down an ounce or more, then offer them that supplement and gradually add a little bit more into it over the next few days until you get the right amount that the baby needs. And that's extra feeding after you've done a normal nursing. So if you've nursed 10 minutes aside and you still feel like the baby at the end of the day might be a little hungry, offer that supplement, preferably of soy formula, and see if that fills the rest of that little tummy up. And I know that always gave me confidence that I knew that baby was absolutely stuffed and well fed. And so that was important to me as a mother, to make sure that feeding was a good one.
Well, my experience with Dr. Denmark and the supplementing that came with my second child, the first one didn't feel the need for that, but the second one, I expected her to jump right on the schedule and sleep through the night right away, and 4 or 5, 6 days into it, and she's still just doing a lot of crying at night, and I began to think, maybe she's hungry. So I called Dr. Denmark, and she said, you're a mom taking care of a husband and a home, and now 2 little children, ages 1 and 0, 1 and newborn, and your body just cannot keep up with it. So I did that very thing, that 10 p.m. feeding, go ahead and nurse, offer that bottle, and I was very surprised to find that she took that amount and wanted that extra couple of ounces at the end of the day. And instantly, from that very first time that we did that, she was sleeping through the night. And it's okay if your body cannot completely keep up. That's what a supplement is for.
That is perfectly normal, especially you younger moms who are active. You know, you may find that as you get feeling good, you get moving around more, and your body's just can't produce everything. It can't have calories for us and calories to make the nursing. But also just to encourage you, if you are nursing, make sure you get lots of liquids, non-caffeinated liquids. That's very important. And keep your caloric intake up. Make sure you're eating properly. And you want to watch what you're eating. You want to cut back on the caffeine and cut back on spicy foods or controversial foods like tuna fish and broccoli, because that will flavor your milk and have an effect on the baby's reaction to the milk. And of course, Dr. Denmark always says, don't drink any milk. And we'll go into that when we talk about the baby food issue, how to feed the baby once the baby gets 3 months old. She says, cow's milk is the perfect food for a baby cow, but it's not necessarily the best food for a human baby. And so if your baby has any type of lactose intolerant issues, which a lot of infants do, if you guzzle and drink a lot of milk, those allergic reactions could enter the baby and cause some problems. So you want to watch your diet. You want to keep up your liquids, lots of water, lots of non-caffeinated liquids, and keep up your caloric intake. A very simple, not a bland diet, but a very simple diet with not too many spicy foods. So that will all impact your milk if you happen to be a nursing mother. Well, one thing I want to touch on is actually how you hold the baby. You know, Dr. Denmark is so thorough. If you were able to go into her doctor's office, you would have heard all this information, but she would also show you how to bathe the baby and hold the baby. And she said, you know, a baby's eyes are so sensitive when it's first born, so to always be holding it up under the lights, it's very sensitive to the baby's eyes. And so, my husband calls this the Dr. Denmark football hold. A good hold for a newborn is this, do I have it right?
That's right.
We've all done this plenty of times. It gives the head a good place to rest. If the baby has any little bit of gas or tummy troubles, your hand is warmly against their tummy, and they can bounce that out, and any air can come out that needs to come out. Also, again, it protects the eyes. Any drool that needs to come out can come out this way, and it's completely against the mother's body. It's just a snuggly place for the baby to be. And I know my husband would carry, he had so many children, you know, we had so many, he got so used to carrying the baby around that he wouldn't even hardly remember he had one in his arms. He'd just be having that newborn in the football hole, be walking around and having conversations, doing work. But it was such a great way. That baby was so content in this snuggly, secure position. And then, as you see, as the head strengthens and the baby, as the weeks go by, the baby's going to get stronger, the baby's going to want to move around, and the neck's going to be stronger. Then you can move it to the normal position that you would have up here. But initially, protect those little eyes and that little body that wants to be limp and move around a little bit, and just snuggle them tight when you're carrying them around.
Now we'd like to talk about how you actually make Dr. Denmark's recipe for baby food. You know, on the Dr. Denmark schedule, we begin solids at 3 months. There's a reason for that. Your baby will actually give you a sign that he is ready for baby food. You'll notice right around 12 weeks that the baby will begin to drool. Yesterday, the clothes were fine and dry, but suddenly at almost the day of 12 weeks old, you'll begin to notice the clothes are just wet from drooling. You'll wipe it, maybe put a bib on, and just a few hours later, the clothes will be soaked again. It's really a sudden change in that drooling begins. The reason for that is that the baby's body begins to produce an enzyme called ptyalin that helps with the digestion of starches and carbohydrates. That is your signal that your baby is ready to begin digesting solids. It's not a sign for teething, as many people will tell you, but prepare yourself to begin the adventure of baby food. At this time, your baby is growing faster than he ever will in his life. You will remember that your feeding times are 6, 10, 2, 6, and 10. And still you'll nurse at those times. But for the 3 middle feedings of the day, the 10 a.m., the 2 p.m., and the 6 p.m., you'll add solids. And there's a very orderly way that we do that, adding 1 food every 4 to 7 days, just so that you'll have a chance to check for food allergies that your child might have. Okay, how will you do this? Well, you can just hold your baby across your leg or your lap, or you can sit him in a little bouncy seat. Make sure you have a rubber tip spoon to feed with, and have your camera ready, because you can expect a funny little face when your baby experiences the first time you put the spoon and the baby food into his mouth. I can remember with my children, I would add that tiny little bit of food on that very first time into their mouth, and they would mix it around, add their own saliva to it, and spit it back out. It would be twice as much as I put in. But my word to you on that is persevere. Don't let the fact that they spit it back out at you in the beginning make you think that the child is not ready for baby food. At 12 weeks, they are ready. And you just have to let them form a habit of learning what to do with a spoon and what to do with the baby food. And in just a short amount of time, they'll be eating a great amount of really nutritional food. Okay, how to begin making the baby food? Well, the first ingredient is cereal. Now, I've already prepared this. You just mix it according to package directions. You can add breast milk or formula to the cereal, and you begin with a very tiny amount. In the beginning, on that very first day, it is just 1/4 of a teaspoon of food that you'll be feeding your little one. You'll do that for 4 to 7 days. You can check for food allergies by watching for a rash that might develop. a runny nose, clear runny nose, or a little rash on the bottom. By the end of the 4 to 7 days, if you don't notice anything that is a sign of a food allergy, then you can be sure that the cereal will be fine. And over the 4 to 7 days, you'll go from 1/4 teaspoon of the food on the first day to 2 tablespoons. And you just gradually work up to that over time. So we'll put 2 tablespoons of our cereal in here. Now it should always be warm, should be pudding smooth. As the baby grows older, you'll be able to have it not quite so thin, but in the beginning you'll want it very watery and warm and smooth. So there's the 2 tablespoons that you would feed the baby the first day on through the end of that first week. Now your second ingredient that you will add will be bananas. You can always buy bananas in a jar of baby food, but over time as your quantity increases that you are making, you'll begin to want to just take a fresh banana. It's what Dr. Denmark has always recommended. You can just take that fresh banana and just mash it up with a fork, and it'll look just like baby food out of the jar, and that's what you can use, and it is less expensive to do that. But let's say we've had our week, our 4 to 7 days, and we've worked up to 2 tablespoons of cereal, and the baby's doing great. Well, when we add the second ingredient, we always go back to start with 1/4 teaspoon. So I'll put a little 1/4 teaspoon in there. Mix that up real good, and over the period of the 4 to 7 days, I would increase it to 2 tablespoons of the bananas, and that's assuming that there's no food allergy. And you do mix all of the food together. Now that's something very interesting that you may not have heard before, but there's a reason for that. You mix all the food together, Dr. Denmark said to me, because you don't want the baby to be able to take only the yummy bananas or applesauce and leave off the green vegetables or the protein. So when you mix all the food together, it all tastes yummy, and the baby will eat all of the healthy food. You'll want some sort of kitchen appliance to blend your food together. I've used a mixer, a food processor, or even just a little hand blender like you might make milkshakes with will be just fine for this. But we'll put all of our food together. So far we have 2 tablespoons of cereal, and let's say we've worked up to 2 tablespoons of banana, and baby is doing fine. And you always just put it in your blender and just zap it to get it nice and smooth. And then you'll be able to just put it in your bowl and feed it right there to your baby. Now, if they're doing fine with cereal and bananas, your next ingredient would be applesauce. Applesauce, of course, comes in the baby food jars, but when I increase in quantity, I always go to using just applesauce that I would feed my older children. You want to be sure and read the label that it's only apples and water, not with a lot of extra sugars and other things added to it. So just apples and water, but that is certainly the most economical way to buy your applesauce. Now with 2 tablespoons of cereal and 2 tablespoons of bananas, we'll begin applesauce with, you probably guessed, 1/4 teaspoon, just a tiny amount added to the mixture. That's on the first day of applesauce. And over the course of the 4 to 7 days, you'll increase gradually the amount of your applesauce until you work up to 2 tablespoons. And each time, you'll just be adding it to the amount that you already have. You'll put it in your blender or your food processor and just mix it to get it good and puree. And that just mixes it really well together, and you'll just pour it into your bowl and feed that little one. Dr. Denmark says stir it, heat it, mix it all with the very same spoon just to save work on the mother. So just make it as easy for yourself as you can. If your baby's doing fine with those 3 ingredients, then you'll begin your vegetable. You can choose a green leafy vegetable or a yellow vegetable. I usually start mine with green beans. Carrots are fine. As I increase in quantity again, I begin usually to cook fresh carrots, any fresh vegetables that you want to cook without seasonings, things that you would normally cook for your family, and just plop that right in there in your blender or food processor. But as we add the green beans, you'll know what we have already in our mixture is 2 tablespoons of the cereal, 2 tablespoons of the banana, 2 tablespoons of the applesauce, and now we're beginning with a little bitty 1/4 teaspoon of our green beans. And that will definitely change the color and the appearance of the food, but the sweetness of the bananas and the applesauce will not make your baby notice really the fact that you've added a green vegetable, and so they will still love it. Over the course of the 4 to 7 days, you'll gradually increase your green beans to where you have a full 2 tablespoons. So now you have 2 tablespoons of all of your ingredients. You would mix that up, pour it into your bowl, warm it, and feed it to your little one. The last ingredient that you'll add will be your protein. Now your protein can come from a lean beef or chicken, scrambled eggs or black-eyed peas, any healthy protein. I just have beef here in a baby food jar, but again, with your quantity, you can begin to find more economical ways to do that than a whole lot of little baby food jars. Now, of course, we would add just the little 1/4 teaspoon to our mixture, and over the course of 4 to 7 days, we would increase it to 2 tablespoons. So we'll add that in there. And we'll mix it all up. All right, I want you to be able to see what this actually looks like. So you have 2 tablespoons of all of your ingredients there. And this is pretty much what your mixture for your little one will look like. This is our Dr. Denmark mush, and although you may think that it looks and maybe even tastes not so wonderful to you, the mom, you will find that your little infant will love it and will thrive on it. It is very healthy. Really, your child will probably never eat as healthy again the rest of its life as it does these early days eating this healthy Dr. Denmark mush. Now that all of your ingredients are in your Dr. Denmark mush, Dr. Denmark's rule of thumb is that the baby should always leave 1 to 2 bites in the bowl. So if you feed your little one at breakfast this entire bowl of food and they just scrape the bowl clean, you'll know at the next meal just to increase a few bites. And each time do that so they're just leaving that little bit and you know that they got enough. Well, over time, by the time your little one is 5 months old, they'll probably level out at about 1.5 to 2 cups of this Dr. Denmark mush at each meal, the 3 times a day. Dr. Denmark says that's as much as a grown man eats, and it is so important for them to be eating this incredibly nutritious meal 3 times a day at this time of growth. If you think about a little infant when they're first born, that small head, how tiny it is, and then think about the cute 2-year-old that you know, which is the little tiny body with the little head that looks like it might be a little too big for that skinny neck. You think, what happened from the time of infancy to that time the child got 2 years old? That brain, that skull grew so much. There is incredible brain development going on during that time, and that is the time that you want to be feeding that brain that excellent nutrition. I had many conversations with Dr. Denmark about the mush simply because she instructed me that I needed to continue to feed it to my little ones until they were 2 years old. Now, that was a new concept to me. I'd never heard of any child eating mush until they were 2 years old. And as a new mother, I was not sure that I had the confidence to continue to do that. There's so many temptations to just feed them a little bit off of your plate, hand them a French fry here and there, and you'll find that if you do that, it's very difficult to stick with the just mush. But if you're faithful to never offer them any food off of a plate and just make it a sort of an exciting thing that the day they turn 2 years old they can begin to eat real food, then you will easily be able to stick with just the Dr. Denmark mush over the 2-year period, and they will eat so wonderfully for you. The reason that you want to feed the Dr. Denmark mush to the baby until they're 2 years old is because to eat real food, babies need teeth. they need molars back here to really chew with. And those molars don't actually come in until around 2 years old. So the baby that you see 8 or 10 months old eating French fries and pizza really is not getting full benefit of whatever food they're eating that's considered adult food, because they're kind of just grinding on it and then swallowing it whole. So when a baby goes from eating 2 cups of this food 3 times a day to just swallowing a few French fries, a little piece of hamburger, a little bite of mashed potatoes here and there, that's a dramatic drop in the amount of calories they're taking in. And once again, they need that incredible amount of calories and good nutrition while the brain is on the grow. I remember discussing this with Dr. Denmark because it was an issue for me as a mother of just one child at the time, the first time we did this, going out to dinner, and my daughter was 20 months old. She could feed the mush to herself, and we would sit down to dinner. She would start right away just eating her little bowl of mush. My husband and I would have our meal, and people all around could not hold their comments back and watching a baby that old, almost 2 years old, eating the mush, and just thought maybe this is a little bit too strange. So of course I went straight to Dr. Denmark, and she just really encouraged me to remember that a baby's head, how much it grows from that infancy to 2-year-old period, and from that time on, from 2 years on into adulthood, the skull, the brain, only grows a few more inches the rest of their life. So she just settled my insecurities by telling me that the baby's full brain capacity could only be reached if they had excellent nutrition from that 3 months to 2-year period. So she said it'll really show up in school and the grades that they make and the way the brain develops if you'll just hang in there and feed them this excellent nutrition of Dr. Denmark food all the way till the 2-year mark. Well, I know you've heard about the Dr. Denmark schedule, how we've fed them at 6, 10, 2, 6, and 10 from birth to 3 months. And now we've told you how at 3 months you'll begin to add the solids at just the middle feedings of the day, the 10, 2, and 6. And you will see very quickly how the amount of food that your child wants will increase, and that will enable you to drop, somewhere around 3.5 to 4 months, you'll be able to drop that 10 p.m. feeding. Actually, what happens is you'll go to wake the baby up for the 10 p.m. feeding, and she is just way too sleepy. You won't even be able to get her alert and awake enough to give her that feeding. And that is a good sign at that age that she can sleep on through the night. From that time after you feed her that 6 o'clock feeding, put her down around 7, she'll be able to sleep on through the night all the way until the first meal of the next morning. Now, as that progresses and the child gets on to 4 months old, you'll be able to change their meals to 3 meals a day. And that's exactly what you're working toward, 3 great meals a day, just like what we want to eat for ourselves. At that point, you'll be able to change the eating times to 7, 12:30, and 6, and that'll be their 3 meals a day. And they'll be eating their 2 cups of this Dr. Denmark mush at those 3 meals. They'll only need water to go with their meals and only water in between meals. Dr. Denmark says that there are a lot of people who sell a lot of things that are not good for children. And she's speaking of the Cokes and candy and apple juice and Cheerios and all the things, the sweets along the way, that babies, little children do not need on a regular basis. So you want to try to stay away from those and spend your money on the good, nutritional baby food that your baby really needs. Well, let's talk a little bit about what your baby will be drinking. You know that you'll be nursing or bottle feeding if necessary for those first few months. But at 7 months, Dr. Denmark says it's time to wean the baby. Now, weaning the baby can be done very simply and easily, and you will only wean to water. Water will be the best drink for the baby once she is weaned. At this point, you have been feeding the baby the three meals a day at 7, 12:30, and 6. And so what you'll do is just first drop the lunchtime nursing or bottle feeding. Just go right ahead with the baby food. Give the child a little sip of water, a few sips of water, whatever they'll begin to take. It'll take a little time to get adjusted to that. And you'll just drop that lunchtime feeding. Take a few days, maybe even a week to do that, and then next you'll drop the breakfast nursing or bottle feeding. Give it a little bit of time for that, a few days to a week, and then lastly you'll drop that nighttime nursing or bottle feeding. It's a very simple method for weaning your baby. Okay, let's talk about dairy. dairy products. Dr. Denmark firmly believes that after the weaning process is over, babies do not need more milk to drink milk the rest of their lives. Now, that is somewhat of a controversial issue, but I think if you will just read what Dr. Denmark says about that, you'll begin to understand that all food contains calcium, and a healthy diet gives you plenty of calcium. At the point where a baby is nursing, the mother's milk is God-given. It is the best food for the baby. But when the weaning time comes at 7 months, there's no need for extra milk to be added to the diet. Cow's milk contains an enormous amount of calcium and phosphorus that would have to be either stored or excreted and can cause a great deal of health problems in a little one. Even stuffy noses, ear infections, there's just a multitude of things that are not positive things that milk can cause. Many allergies, if there's any hint of lactose intolerance in your child, you will definitely see that show up as you begin to add cow's milk. So the thing to do is keep your healthy baby food, wean your child at 7 months over to water, and you will not see the need to add milk to the child's diet.
So Tiffany, what difference do you think these philosophies have made in your life as a first-time mom?
It's actually made it very easy and given me the chance to enjoy him for the cute little baby that he is. And
what was your experience with the schedule? Because I know you started the schedule right from the beginning when you got home from the hospital. How did that go?
He took to it perfect. He was the third day he was home, he was sleeping through the night. And
what does your husband think about this?
He loves it. He loves the fact that we can time everything that he's going to do and know that when he's going to cry and when he's not going to cry and when it's time to sleep, and he's going to do it every way that we show him. And
I know a lot of first-time moms, the big question is, will my baby gain properly on this method? How's Tristan's gaining and growth been?
Very, very good. He's getting bigger, it seems like, every day. All of his clothes don't fit anymore, and he's getting very big, growing fast. It seems like every week he grows faster.
And I know another big issue for first-time moms is listening to that crying. How has that been, those cry times of Tristan's?
It was hard in the beginning. It made me want to cry. I did cry the first few times, but actually I would sit there and just watch him to make sure that nothing was wrong, but it made me feel better as I saw, as the time went along, that it was working and he was starting to change and getting used to the fact that he knew when I was going to feed him and that he was going to be okay and that he didn't have to be upset, and he was comforted at the fact of that.
Right, and did you notice, I know he's over 3 months old now, did you notice the crying time dramatically drop off once he got to that 3-month mark?
Absolutely. That's what it seems the past few weeks, that he just all of a sudden stopped crying. He doesn't cry, and when it's time to eat, it's just he waits around or I have to wake him up, and then he eats, and then he's fine. He doesn't cry, and he actually doesn't cry at all. We were talking about that the other day, that he doesn't cry at all. He'll fuss a little when when he gets sleepy, and he'll let you know, but it's not crying at all. Mm-hmm. He's great.
Okay, and how about starting the baby foods? I know I got to experience a little bit of that with you and be with you on that day. How did he take to the solids?
He loves it. He ate so much of it, he eats so much of it already. He loves it. He barely spits it out. He takes it all and is ready to eat more. He's doing great with it.
And how do you think your experience as a first-time new mom using Dr. Denmark's philosophy compares with some of the other maybe new mothers that you know that are not using this philosophy?
Totally different. I heard everyone can't believe the fact that all the things that he does and all the way he is and the way he's advanced so much and just the way he acts. They can't believe he sleeps through the night, and they can't believe that he doesn't cry all the time, and I'm not coming in with bags under my eyes when they see me, and I'm irritated or anything like that, when they had a horrible time their whole first year. And they can't believe he slept through the night, the third night, and sleeps all the time through the night, and is predictable and does everything that I say he's going to do, and people just don't believe it.
Well, and I know you took, I think, your first overnight trip with your husband and Tristan out of town. How did that go with a baby on a schedule?
it was great. Just kept to it and stopped on the way and had to feed him, but it was easy, and took his bassinet with us and had a nice hotel room, and just everything was the same. Nothing was different at all. He slept. He didn't realize he wasn't at home. Everything was exactly the same. He did great.
The film you have just watched is the video portion of an E6-4 lesson. E6-4 is the software curriculum that provides education with a strong biblical worldview. Be sure to visit the website at www.e6-4.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay informed about new lessons available or special events. One of the many features of E6-4 is the student-directed learning mode, where the student is free to choose from dozens of lessons in over 20 categories, including math, reading, history, science, and the Bible. Another feature is the father-directed learning mode, where a father or classroom teacher can create an individualized lesson plan for each student, and the software will teach the student one section at a time, keeping records of his progress. A third feature is the family worship mode, which is ideal for family worship, school chapel services, family Sunday school classes, or church Bible study groups. Once you set up your lesson plan, this mode offers instruction and catechism, one lesson section at a time. Reminds you to do prayer, Thanksgiving and praise, Bible memorization, and includes a complete music section with songs and hymns for worship. Each song can be played with or without the vocals. Another E6-4 feature is the competition mode, where you create a lesson plan and the program randomly selects question sets from the lessons to create a fun and exciting competition, which can be as small as the competition our family does every day in our daily family worship, to as large as the Southeast Bible competition we conducted with multiple rounds and prizes, including a new laptop computer and tickets to a major theme park. Another feature is Apples of Gold, a computerized parlor game for more advanced students, where two clue givers devise clues to help their teams come up with a phrase from the Bible. To purchase the E6-4 software, visit the website at www.e6-4.com. To schedule the Homeschool Advantage to come to your church or homeschool conference and teach your people how to use computer software to build strong biblical households, contact Captain Bret at 678-570-2195 or email terabenth@inbox.com.